So far, we've only been using this black arrow. That's your main tool to kind of select things, move things around. But now let's look at these next 5 tools right here, and they're all made for drawing shapes and things. So this first one is just the square tool, right? I can drag it out. If I hold shift, it will constrain it to a perfect square. But I'm just going to go ahead and just draw out anything. So right now you'll see this thing has a fill of white and a border of gray. So if I just kind of go back to my arrow, click out of it, right? So this is it. Not very exciting. But what we can do is change the fill, right? So I can go ahead and pick a new fill color. I will guarantee you never, a lot of times you don't want a border, so I'll just turn it off. But maybe you want a border that's slightly darker than the object or something like that. I think would be okay, right? If you're going to use borders, I honestly turn off borders probably 60%, 75% of the time on things, if not more. What else can we do here? Notice that we can change how the stroke goes around. We can actually put in dashes if we put in numbers here, but we can change if the stroke's on the outside, centered. These are the end of a stroke. That's not going to really matter. If it is kind of rounded, I'm probably not going to need that. Just leave that there. You could put a drop shadow on something. So here we can just go ahead and change. See, now look at the way the drop shadow is moving as I use my arrow keys here. Right? How about let's see, background blur. We don't want that one, right? So that's most of it. We could also make this rounded, and that's pretty important for web design, right? So this is like border radius right here. If you notice, there's this little circle here that I just grabbed and I turned into a different roundedness. You can actually wind up, so you'll notice it's right here. So this is called the inspector. This is kind of showing us everything. So if we have this drawn out, we oftentimes probably want to keep it to a nice width, right? So maybe I'll say 280 and I'll make it 200 high, right? That's pretty important right there to kind of have, this is like the CSS, right, that you're going to write if you're doing the code. Even if you're in Webflow, right, you can set these things by just typing them in. We can change that rounded corner to be separate rounded corners. So if I go ahead and if I hold the Option key, I can do it visually here, right? I have that one different, but I could have just as easily gone over here and typed in a different number, right? So there it is. I've got a shape that looks like that. That's pretty good, and it's got a drop shadow. Everything's coming up Ripka. Go down to the next one. You've got the circle, right? So you can draw an ellipse. If you hold shift, it becomes a perfect circle. So I'll go ahead and draw a perfect circle, and it's got all the same properties over here. One other thing I guess I forgot to show, and I'll just go back to this, is that we have the opacity as well, right? But we probably wouldn't use that. We probably use color and things like that. So I have this circle here, and again, it's all the same thing. So it's just a simple shape. Then we have this polygon tool. And so by default, it's going to draw a triangle. But if I use my up and down arrows, I can change what kind of polygon it is. I can also come over here, right, and say, oh, make that into a stop sign. This is, I believe, the curve of how the edges, when it's noticed that, that did there. This will make it star. You'll never use this. I don't know why I'm showing it, but look, I made it do that, right? So that like put an inside kind of thing, and then I'm sure I could do something, right? Make that sharper or not sharper. Obviously, you probably never use that. I don't know why I'm showing it. Honestly, a polygon tool, not a whole lot of use for that, but it's there in case you need it. Maybe more than likely you would be drawing an icon if you're using that. Then we have the line tool, right? And so the line tool, we could just simply draw out a line. If we hold shift, it constrains it to straight or 45 degrees, so 90 or 45 degree angles. Can draw it out. Just like the borders of these, I could change it to dashes and stuff. So I could say, right, 5 and 5 gap, right? So I've drawn now a dashed line. I can up the size. So if I want it to be a thicker line, I'll make it a 5 pixel thick line, right? So we know all about borders, right? So this would be if you're just drawing a single line. Yeah, not much else to say about that one, so I'll just leave that one right here. This is the pen tool, though. This is the most complicated. Now, if you've ever used Adobe Illustrator, the pen tool is pretty much your main drawing tool. And so this draws, these are all vector shapes. And what it means to be a vector shape is that they're kind of calculated by math, is how you could kind of think about it. And so if I just click and click and click, right, obviously I can just draw these straight lines. But if I click and drag, whoops, it went off the pen tool. Click and drag, you'll see I'm drawing these what are called handles. And this is making what's called Bezier curves. And so I can make blobby rounded shapes, right? And did it not finish? For some reason it didn't finish. Let's go right there. Oops, if you leave it open, you're gonna have to go pick it back up and go there. I guess I didn't click on that last one. So you see here, I've gotten this roundy shape, right? And so a lot of times, a lot of things in web design, you'll see a lot of like blobby shapes kind of built in when you're going through your inspiration. You'll kind of see this come up. So you see here I have this, and what I would do is usually fill this with a gradient, but I'm going to make a different video for that. I also want to point out one other thing. Do you notice how when I drew it off the artboard, when I don't have it selected, I can't see it, it automatically kind of trims the view here. So if I filled this with with I don't know, any color, right, you'll see that it has this. It stays like that. That can be very handy when you're laying out things. So those are the main drawing tools. I'm going to make a separate video and I'm going to fill this with a nice gradient, and then we'll move on to the text tool.